Joey lost his temper and spoke to his nephew, disgusted with the disrespect directed towards him by Tate. Tate. No response. Tate continued chewing. Joey's eyebrows lowered. How dare you? Tate looked over at him. There was no apology in his expression. No embarrassment. If anything, he looked amused. Joey held out his hand. Put it back. Tate stared at him as if Joey had just made the most ridiculous request imaginable. The corner of Tate's mouth lifted. Make me old man. The words came out as a low hiss. He took another bite of the chicken wing. The entire table froze. Joey leaned back slightly, staring at his nephew. For a moment he looked less angry and more disappointed. Tate, he said slowly. But Tate only continued chewing, maintaining eye contact. Noah looked between the two of them. The pattern was becoming obvious. Every time someone set a boundary, Tate seemed determined to push harder. Talia watched silently from across the table. She had seen enough. This wasn't about a chicken wing. It wasn't about a chair. It wasn't about Mark anymore. It was Tate testing how far he could go. Joey folded his arms. You really want to play this game? Tate swallowed and leaned back in his chair. He looked completely confident. The room waited. Because everyone knew Joey loved Tate, but Joey also had his limits. And Tate had spent the entire evening searching for them. Joey slowly placed his napkin down on the tablecloth. The movement was calm. Too calm. The room was immediately noticed. The joking atmosphere disappeared as Joey pushed his chair back and stood. He didn't raise his voice at first. He didn't need to. He simply looked at his nephew. Tate. Tate looked up at him, still holding the chicken wing. Joey's expression had changed. The amusement was gone. The patience was gone. What remained was the look of an uncle who loved his nephew but had reached the end of his tolerance. Stand up. The command was firm. The entire table went silent. Tate blinked. For a moment he seemed almost surprised that Joey wasn't playing along. Then his familiar defiant smile returned. Oh, you speaking to me, old man? Joey didn't move. Tate. But Tate leaned back in his chair, looking up at his uncle with open defiance. What are you going to do? He gave a small scoff. You going to fight me to defend your honor or something? Nobody at the table laughed. Not even Noah. Joey stared at him. Tate continued, the words coming out sharper. You have no honor, Joey. A long silence followed. Joey's jaw tightened slightly. Talia watched carefully. Everyone knew this had gone beyond teasing. Tate had spent the entire evening pushing every person at the table, waiting for someone to react. Joey took one slow breath. Tate. His voice was lower now. Stand up. But Tate remained seated. Still holding the chicken wing. Still refusing. The room waited to see what would happen next. Because everyone knew Joey wasn't angry because of the food. He wasn't angry because of the chair. He wasn't angry because of the argument. He was angry because Tate was treating everyone who cared about him like they were opponents in a game he had to win. Joey's expression hardened. The room had never seen him like this before. He had always been the one who joked, the one who softened tense moments, the one who could usually find a way to make Tate laugh or redirect him when he became difficult. But this time was different. He looked directly at his nephew. Apologize to your mother. His voice dropped into a deep, steady tone that immediately commanded attention. Apologize to the guest. A pause. And sit down and be quiet. No one at the table moved. No one had ever heard Joey speak to Tate that way. It wasn't anger for the sake of anger. It was a firm boundary. A line that had finally been reached. Tate stared at him. For a moment, everyone wondered if he was actually going to listen. Then Tate's expression changed. The defiance returned. Instead of answering, he made a deliberately disrespectful hand gesture toward Joey, flipping off his angry uncle. The reaction around the table was immediate. Everyone froze. The silence afterward felt heavier than anything that had happened all evening. Joey stared at Tate. The disappointment on his face was unmistakable. Then, in a sudden burst of emotion, Joey reacted and struck Tate across the cheek. The sound echoed through the dining room. Tate stumbled backward several steps, caught completely off guard. The confidence disappeared from his face. For the first time all evening, he looked genuinely shocked. Nobody spoke. The entire family sat frozen, processing what had just happened. Joey stood there, breathing heavily, his own expression shifting as the reality of the moment settled in. The anger that had carried him forward was gone. What remained was the seriousness of what had just occurred. Talia looked between them, her face tense. The argument that had started over a chair had turned into something far bigger. Tate slowly touched his cheek, staring at Joey. For once he had no immediate comeback. No sarcastic remark. No insult. Just silence. And the entire table understood that the evening had crossed a line that nobody could pretend hadn't happened. A red mark quickly appeared on Tate's cheek. For a moment he didn't move. He simply stood there staring at Joey. The shock faded. Then the anger arrived. His face tightened, his jaw clenched, and everyone at the table could see the storm building behind his eyes. Talia immediately pushed her chair back. Enough. Her voice cut through the room. She had reached the point where she was no longer concerned about who was right or who was wrong. The situation had gone far beyond an argument over respect, dinner, or a rude comment. Both of them had crossed a line. Both of you, she said firmly, leave the table before someone gets hurt. Both of you resolve your differences outside so we can finish eating, now. She looked between Joey and Tate. You are not going to stand here and turn this dining room into a battlefield. She reached toward the table, worried that the tension would escalate even further. But before she could say anything else, Tate moved. Fast. His anger took over. He stepped forward and struck Joey across the cheek. The sound was sharp. Immediate. Then came silence. Absolute silence. It was the kind of silence where every tiny sound became noticeable. A pencil near Andrew's plate rolled slightly and dropped. Clack. Everyone froze. Noah stared at Tate. His face changed completely. The humor, the frustration, the earlier amusement, everything disappeared. Horror replaced it. Tate had just struck his uncle. Joey stood still, stunned. Even Tate seemed to realize what he had done the moment afterward. The anger on his face faltered. The room was no longer about proving a point. No longer about winning. No longer about who had the last word. Everyone at the table was looking at Tate differently now. Talia slowly stood. Her expression was not one of rage. It was disappointing. Deep disappointment. Tatum Joseph Cornelius Blue. Her voice was quiet. And somehow that was more powerful than shouting. What did you just do? Tate opened his mouth. Nothing came out. For once he had no comeback. No insult. No sarcastic response. Just the realization that he had taken the situation somewhere it never should have gone. Joey touched his cheek, looking at his nephew with a mixture of hurt and disbelief. The entire family sat frozen, understanding that this was no longer a childish argument. A boundary had been crossed that could not simply be laughed away. Uncle Tim looked up from his apple cobbler. For most of the argument, he had been completely lost in his own world, intentionally staying out of the conflict. He had learned a long time ago that getting in the middle of Tate's battles usually made things worse. Tate was stubborn, and when he felt challenged, he could hold onto a grudge for a very long time. Tim had hoped the situation would burn itself out. But after seeing Tate strike Joey, he couldn't stay silent. He slowly set his spoon down. Tate, Tim said firmly. Everyone looked over. That is unacceptable. Tate, still standing near the table, looked over at him. Tim continued. You apologized to your uncle. The room waited. For a brief moment, it seemed like Tate might actually consider it. Then his expression hardened. Instead of apologizing, Tate responded with another act of defiance, spitting toward Tim. The disrespect stunned everyone at the table. Tim sat frozen, shocked by what had just happened. The room became completely silent. Tate looked around at everyone. I'm never going to apologize to Joey, he said angrily. And all of you can just go fuck yourselves. No one responded. There was nothing anyone could say in that moment that would make the situation better. Tate shoved his chair back and stood. He walked away from the table, still furious. A few moments later, everyone heard his footsteps going upstairs. Then, bang! His bedroom door slammed shut. The sound echoed through the house. Nobody moved for several seconds. Finally, Talia slowly exhaled. "I'm sorry about that," she said quietly. Her voice carried exhaustion more than anger. There is no excuse for his behavior. She looked around the table at her guests and family. Until Tate can apologize to the people he hurt and take responsibility for what he did, he will not be attending any more Sunday dinners. No one argued. Everyone understood. The evening had gone far beyond a simple disagreement. The disrespect, the anger, and the refusal to take responsibility had hurt everyone sitting at the table. After another uncomfortable pause, someone carefully tried to change the subject. A conversation about anything else. Something normal. Something that could bring a little dignity back to the evening. Everyone understood the attempt. Nobody wanted the night to end with only anger and disappointment. But the empty chair at the table remained a reminder of what had happened. Noah sat at the table for a few more minutes, but his appetite was gone. The conversation around him felt forced. Everyone was trying to pretend the evening could be salvaged, trying to return to normal, but the tension still lingered in the room. The empty chair where Tate had been sitting seemed louder than any conversation. Finally, Noah pushed his chair back. "Excuse me for a minute." Nobody questioned him. Talia glanced up but simply nodded. Noah left the dining room and made his way upstairs. With every step, he felt the weight of the conversation ahead. He knew Tate. He knew how stubborn he could be. He knew that once Tate felt attacked or embarrassed, he often retreated behind anger and defiance instead of admitting he was wrong. But this was different. Tonight had gone too far. Noah stopped outside Tate's bedroom door. For a moment he just stood there. He dreaded what was waiting on the other side. Then he raised his hand and knocked. A few seconds passed. Nothing. Noah knocked again. "Tate." Silence. Then from inside the room. "Let me in." Noah sighed quietly. "Tate, it's me." Another pause. Then came the sound of movement inside. Noah reached for the doorknob and gently turned it. The door opened. He stepped inside. Tate was sitting in his room, still visibly angry, his arms crossed and his expression closed off. He looked like he was waiting for Noah to take his side. Noah stood in the doorway for a moment. Neither of them spoke. Finally, Noah closed the door behind him. "Tate." Tate looked away. "What?" Noah stared at him. He had come upstairs expecting an argument. What he found instead was someone who was still furious, but also someone who had clearly not figured out what to do with the consequences of his own actions. "No," Noah said quietly, "we're going to talk about what happened." Tate's eyes narrowed. And Noah knew immediately this conversation was going to be difficult. Noah eased himself down onto the edge of the wide mattress, the expensive sheets cool under his palms. He had barely settled beside Tate when the rich boy's expression twisted into something sharp and furious. Before Noah could open his mouth to speak, Tate's hands shot out, palms flat against Noah's chest, and shoved him backward. Noah's shoulders hit the bed with a muted thud, his body sprawling across the rumpled covers. Tate moved fast, swinging one leg over Noah's waist and settling his full weight down, knees bracketing Noah's hips as he straddled him completely. The sudden pressure pinned Noah in place, the heat of Tate's body sinking through their clothes. Noah stared upward, breath catching. Above him, Tate's hazel eyes blazed with defiance and anger, the worst-behaved rich boy in Lowe's Angels glaring down like he meant to burn holes straight through him. Tate leaned in slowly, the lean line of his torso stretching as he brought his face close. His mouth hovered just above Noah's cheek, breath warm and uneven against the skin there. The tension in the room thickened with every second of silence. "You didn't defend me," Tate hissed, voice low and biting. "You let them disrespect me." Noah's lips parted, the start of an explanation forming, but Tate's hand clamped down hard over his mouth before any sound could escape. Fingers pressed firmly against Noah's jaw, sealing the words inside. Noah's eyes widened, his muffled attempt at speech vibrating uselessly against Tate's palm. Tate's grip didn't loosen. He stayed right there, straddling Noah's hips, body leaning forward so their chests nearly touched. The weight of him kept Noah flat on his back, unable to rise or twist away. Hazel eyes stayed locked on Noah's, burning with the same furious demand. "How come you never defend me anymore?" Tate asked again, the question rough and accusing, his hand still covering Noah's mouth. The rich boy's thighs tightened around Noah's sides, holding him captive on the bed while he waited for an answer that couldn't come yet. The breath rushed out of Noah's lungs as Tate caught him completely off guard, flipping him backward from a sitting position onto the mattress. Before Noah could recover, Tate was over him, pinning him in place with startling speed. Noah's pulse raced. It always did when Tate was this close. The sheer force of Tate's presence made heat creep into Noah's cheeks, and his thoughts scattered before he could organize them. He twisted beneath him, trying to wriggle free, but it was useless. Tate's grip was firm, and every attempt to escape only reminded Noah how thoroughly he was being held. "Where do you think you're going?" Tate demanded. One hand pressed against Noah's upper chest, preventing him from sitting up. "Answer me." Noah looked anywhere but into Tate's eyes. "Before you turned 18, Tate continued, his voice low and sharp with hurt, "you defended me. Every time, you were my biggest supporter." His jaw tightened. "Now you stare at your dinner plate whenever I'm around. You act like I'm always the one who's wrong." The accusation hung heavily between them. Tate leaned closer, his words coming in short, frustrated bursts. Noah could feel the intensity in every syllable as Tate searched his face for an answer. "Look at me," Tate said. Noah swallowed. He wanted to explain. He wanted to tell Tate that nothing was as simple as it used to be, that growing older had brought impossible choices, divided loyalties, and fears he couldn't put into words. But with Tate hovering inches away, hurt and anger written across his face, every explanation seemed inadequate. "Tate." "No," Tate shook his head, "you don't get to dodge the question." Noah finally met his gaze. For a fleeting moment, the anger in Tate's expression gave way to something else: betrayal. That hurt Noah far more than the shouting ever could. Tate shook his head, his expression tightening with every word. "When we were younger, you looked at me like I could do no wrong," he said, his voice rough with frustration. "You were always on my side, you knew I had my reasons for the things I did, you always believed the best about me." Noah opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. "Now," Tate let out a bitter laugh, "now you're just like everyone else." The words landed harder than Noah expected. "You don't defend me anymore, you don't even look at me." Silence stretched between them. Noah searched Tate's face, trying to find the anger he'd grown accustomed to. Instead, beneath the glare, he saw something far more painful. "Hurt." It was written plainly in Tate's eyes, even if he would never admit it. "I never stopped caring about you," Noah said quietly. "Don't," Tate cut him off with a sharp shake of his head, "don't tell me what you think I want to hear." He took a step back, folded his arms, and looked away for a moment before speaking again. "Maybe I should just find someone else to spend my nights with." Noah's heart lurched. The words sounded less like a threat and more like an act of desperation, as though Tate wanted to provoke him into reacting. "Tate, get out." Noah didn't move quickly enough. With an impatient shove, Tate forced him away from the edge of the bed. Noah stumbled backward, losing his balance before landing awkwardly on the floor with a dull thud. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Noah looked up from the floor. Tate remained standing beside the bed, his chest rising and falling with uneven breaths. His jaw was clenched so tightly that the muscles along his face trembled. He refused to meet Noah's eyes. The silence between them felt heavier than the argument itself. "Tate, I didn't mean it," Noah said, desperation creeping into his voice as he struggled to explain himself. "Oh, don't bother," Tate snapped, cutting him off before he could say another word. A bitter laugh escaped him. "The only person you'll defend is yourself." He shook his head, hurt flashing across his face before it hardened into anger once more. "Better yet, why don't you go spend time with the bastard who slapped me downstairs?" he said coldly. "You've always wanted to, haven't you?" Noah stared at him, speechless. "If you get cold tonight," Tate continued, his voice trembling despite his effort to sound indifferent, "go crawl into his bed. Maybe he'll keep you warm." He paused, swallowing hard. "'Cause it won't be me." The room fell silent. Noah's heart sank as Tate turned away from him, refusing to let him see the tears threatening to form in his eyes. "Now get out." The words were quiet this time, but they carried more finality than if he'd shouted them. Noah stood frozen, hoping Tate would look back, hoping there was still something left to say that could undo the damage. Tate never turned around. Noah reached out and gently placed a hand on Tate's shoulder. The reaction was immediate. Tate jerked away and shoved Noah's hand aside, his face tightening with anger and hurt. "I wasn't trying to upset you," Noah said quietly. Tate let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "That's always what you say." "No, Tate, listen to me." Noah stepped closer but stopped when he saw the warning in Tate's eyes. "I still don't think it's right for you to call your mother those horrible names, and it isn't okay for you to use that slur against Mark either." Tate's expression hardened. "You don't get it." "No, I do get it," Noah said. "I'm saying you're allowed to be angry, you're allowed to be hurt, but that doesn't make everything you say or do acceptable." Tate looked away. "And you shouldn't have hit Joey back," Noah continued. "He's your uncle, he deserves some respect." For a moment there was only silence. Then Tate turned back toward him, his eyes filled with a mixture of disbelief and fury. "Respect." The word came out like it was something impossible to understand. "You want to talk to me about respect?" Noah opened his mouth but Tate cut him off. "Just get out." "Tate." "No." His voice cracked slightly, but he forced it back into anger. "Leave me alone." Noah stood there watching him. Tate turned his back, his shoulders tense. "Go find him," Tate said quietly. Noah froze. "Go find that uncle you've chosen over me." The accusation hung in the air. Noah wanted to tell him that wasn't true. He wanted to explain that holding Tate accountable didn't mean abandoning him, that loving someone didn't mean agreeing with everything they did. But Tate wasn't listening anymore. He had already built the wall back up. And this time, Noah wasn't sure how to reach him. Noah knew it was hopeless. Whenever Tate got his back against a wall, whenever his pride took over and his anger hardened into something immovable, there was nothing Noah could say that would get through to him. Tate didn't listen when he felt attacked. He didn't reflect. He only protected himself. Noah stood by the bedroom door, his hand resting on the doorknob. For a moment he looked back. Part of him wanted to go to Tate. Part of him wanted to apologize just to end the pain between them, but Noah knew that would only teach Tate that anger and cruelty could make people surrender. "I'm disappointed in you, Tate," Noah said quietly. Tate didn't turn around. "Your mom is a good woman. She deserves the same basic respect that every person in this house deserves." Silence. "I hope someday you ask Joey for forgiveness," Noah continued. "He has never been anything but kind to you, and Mark hasn't done anything to you except exist. You've been giving him a hard time for years, Tate." Noah's voice softened, but he didn't back down. "He's taken a lot from you without fighting back. So yes, maybe he lost his temper once. Maybe he finally reached his limit after years of dealing with your anger." Tate's jaw tightened. "You've had hundreds of little battles with him over the years," Noah said. "And after all this time, I hoped you would learn that not every disagreement is someone attacking you." Still Tate said nothing. Noah swallowed. "Maybe this is what needs to happen for a while. Maybe we should sleep separately until you figure out how to treat people with the respect they deserve." That finally made Tate shift slightly. "I am disappointed in you," Noah said, "but I still love you." The words lingered. "I don't want your uncle, he's not replacing you, he's a mentor, that's all." Noah opened the door. "When you're ready to accept reality instead of fighting everyone who challenges you, you know where to find me." He paused. "But I'm not going to back down. I'm not going to support behavior that hurts people just because you're angry." His expression saddened. "I hoped you would choose better." Noah looked at Tate one last time. "But if you're going to be prideful, arrogant, and disrespectful to people I care about, then maybe it's best that you stay up here and think about it." With that, Noah stepped out of the room. The door closed behind him. For several seconds, Tate remained perfectly still. Then he let out a frustrated breath and crossed his arms. HMPH. The sound was small, almost childish. But underneath the anger was something Tate refused to admit. He was hurt. Tate was a one-of-a-kind person. Noah had never met anyone quite like him. Tate embodied contradiction. He could be fiercely loyal and impossibly stubborn. He could be generous one moment and completely unwilling to admit fault the next. He had a heart that seemed bigger than he wanted anyone to know, yet he protected it behind walls made of pride and anger. The meaning of the word apology seemed almost foreign to him. When Tate made up his mind about something, changing it was nearly impossible. An apology in his mind was not a simple acknowledgement of being wrong, it was a surrender, it was admitting weakness, it was allowing someone else to have power over him. And Tate hated feeling powerless. Noah sometimes wondered if Tate would rather endure every consequence imaginable than simply say 2 words, "I'm sorry." In many ways, Tate represented the worst parts of what people criticized as toxic masculinity, the belief that vulnerability was weakness, that admitting mistakes was humiliation, and that pride mattered more than repairing the damage caused. But what confused Noah was that Tate wasn't incapable of apologizing. There was one exception. Noah. For reasons Noah never fully understood, Tate could sometimes lower the walls for him. He could admit when he had gone too far. He could acknowledge pain he would never reveal to anyone else. That was why Noah struggled to understand him. Were Tate's apologies genuine because he truly cared, or did some part of Tate simply fear losing the one person who made him feel safe? Noah hated that he even questioned it. He loved Tate, that was the simplest and most complicated truth of all. But love did not mean pretending someone had no flaws. Tate needed to understand that he wasn't perfect. Everyone made mistakes. Everyone hurts people sometimes. The difference between a child and a mature adult was not whether they ever failed, it was whether they could accept responsibility afterward. An apology was not a defeat. It was growth. It was a sign that someone valued a relationship more than their own pride. But Tate had never been an ordinary person. He had grown up surrounded by privilege, accustomed to getting his way, and convinced that discomfort was something other people should endure for him. Somewhere along the way, he had learned that if he caused pain, the world would simply adjust around him. Noah knew that wasn't sustainable. No matter how much he loved Tate, he couldn't spend forever protecting him from the consequences of his own choices. Eventually, Tate would have to decide whether being right mattered more than being loved. And Noah feared that might be the hardest lesson Tate had ever been forced to learn. Noah was asleep in his own bed at the Green Rambler. For the first time in a long while, he was sleeping alone. It wasn't because he didn't love Tate, it wasn't because he wanted distance forever. It was because Noah had finally decided that loving someone did not mean accepting every hurtful thing they did. Tate could be angry, Tate could be upset, Tate could feel betrayed. But Tate could not treat everyone around him however he wanted and expect Noah to quietly absorb the damage. Especially when it came to Tate's family. The ride home from Talia's house had been painfully quiet. They had returned about half an hour earlier, and the only sounds during the drive had been the occasional bump from the potholes in the road and the steady hum of the air conditioner. No arguments. No apologies. No conversation. Just silence. Noah had spent the evening wishing he could go back to a simpler time, a time when Tate wasn't constantly fighting every battle as though the world was against him. A time when Tate could laugh without feeling like he had something to prove. A time when Tate didn't act like he was still a child throwing a tantrum because someone told him no. Eventually, exhaustion pulled Noah into sleep. Then the sound of the bedroom door handle moving dragged him back awake. The jingling of the handle echoed through the quiet room. Noah, Tate called from the other side, "Let me in." Noah stared at the ceiling, still half asleep. "Go to bed, Tate." His voice was calm but firm. "No." A pause. Then came the sound of the handle moving again. "No," Tate repeated, sounding less like an adult asking and more like a child refusing to accept an answer. "I said no, Tate." "I order you to let me in," Tate said. Noah closed his eyes. There it was. That stubbornness. That belief that if he pushed hard enough, everyone else would eventually give in. "Open up, Noe, open the door," Tate demanded. "Open." When no footsteps came toward the door, the silence seemed to irritate him further. A moment later, the door shook from 2 sharp kicks. Noah. Tate's voice became more defiant. Do as I say, obey me. Noah sat up slowly, his frustration replacing his sleepiness. You always have to be difficult, Tate complained. The words sounded almost childish. Come to the door now. Noah remained still. For once, he wasn't going to rush to fix Tate's anger. For once, he wasn't going to reward the behavior he had spent years trying to excuse. On the other side of the door, Tate waited. And for the first time, he had to face the possibility that Noah wasn't coming to rescue him from his own emotions. Noah's voice remained steady. Until you can admit your fault, your foolishness, and your pride, you will sleep in your own bedroom. He paused, making sure every word landed. Good night. There was no anger in his tone, no shouting, no attempt to hurt Tate. Just a boundary. And that was somehow worse. Because Tate knew Noah, he knew the difference between Noah being upset and Noah being finished arguing. The doorknob rattled again. You're playing hard to get again, Tate huffed from the hallway. Noah stared at the ceiling. What do you want? Tate continued. I'll give you anything you want, just open the door. Noah almost laughed. Of course. Tate had moved immediately to negotiation. It was one of his favorite strategies. If emotion didn't work, he offered something. If guilt didn't work, he bargained. If an apology felt impossible, he tried to replace it with a promise. You have to want something, Tate said. Everyone wants something. The handle turned again. Is your heart set on something? Whatever it is, it's yours, just let me in. Noah shook his head. Of course Tate would try this. Go to bed, Noah said louder. Silence. Go to bed, Tate, and when I wake up in the morning, you are not going to be in here. Noah pulled the blanket higher. Go back to your room, get under your warm little blankets, put your head on your pillow and go to sleep. A pause. That's an order. Noah placed his head back down and closed his eyes. For a few moments there was nothing. No arguing. No knocking. No angry voice demanding to be heard. Maybe Noah thought Tate had finally accepted it. Then came a quiet chuckle from the other side of the door. Noah opened his eyes. I like your Tate impression, Tate said. Noah sighed. You're so cute when you try to copy me. Tate. Open up, Noah. No. I know you want to. The confidence in Tate's voice was almost irritating. I'll stay here all night, Tate threatened dramatically. I'll knock on this door and keep you awake until you let me in. Noah remained silent. You can lie to yourself, Tate continued, his voice softer now, but I know you. The teasing faded slightly. I know you sleep better when you're comfortable. Noah stared at the ceiling. And I know you miss me. The words hung there. Because that was the problem. Noah did miss him. Missing someone didn't mean surrendering. Loving someone didn't mean ignoring everything that needed to change. Tate, Noah finally said, I love you. The hallway went quiet. But I am not opening this door because you demanded it. Another silence. I need you to understand that. For once, Tate didn't immediately argue. The doorknob stopped moving. And Noah wondered if, beneath all the pride and stubbornness, Tate was finally listening. Fine, Tate said. His voice was suddenly calm, which somehow worried Noah more than the anger. You want to play dirty? Fine, I'll play dirty. There was a pause outside the door. Noah sat up slightly, listening. He knew that tone. It was the tone Tate used when he felt cornered and decided the only way to regain control was to do something dramatic. A few seconds later, Noah heard the faint sound of Tate dialing on his phone. Hello, Tate said loudly. Noah frowned. Tate. I'm fine, Tate continued, clearly making sure Noah could hear every word. Yeah, I was wondering if you wanted to come over. A pause. No, nothing's wrong. Noah closed his eyes. Of course. This was Tate's newest strategy. Not a conversation. Not an apology. A performance. Actually, I'm free, Tate continued. Apparently I'm not welcome in my own bed tonight. I'm hard and I need to have sex. I'll wait 30 minutes. If you don't come, I'll call someone else. Alrighty, Mr. Sex on Legs will be waiting. Bye-bye. Tate was flirting with some unknown girl on his phone, causing Noah to sit inside his locked room, seething with jealousy. Noah sat there, realizing exactly what Tate was doing. He wasn't trying to solve the problem. He was trying to provoke a reaction. A few more seconds passed before Tate ended the call. "See you soon." The silence afterward was almost worse. Then Tate spoke again to Noah through the locked door. "Your loss." Noah heard his footsteps moving away from the door. "You snooze, you lose, Blondie." A moment later, Tate walked down the hallway and closed his own bedroom door. Noah stared at the ceiling. For a long time he said nothing. This was what made Tate so difficult. Just when Noah thought he had finally found the right words, just when he thought he had created a boundary Tate would have to respect, Tate would do something completely unexpected. Something dramatic. Something petty. Something designed to pull the attention back onto him. It was almost impossible to stay upset because Tate was never predictable. He could turn a serious conversation into a competition within seconds, changing the rules before anyone else even realized they were playing. Noah loved many things about Tate. His loyalty. His intensity. The way he cared more deeply than he wanted anyone to know. But this part of him, the part that treated every disagreement like a battle he had to win, exhausted Noah. Because love was not supposed to be a contest. And eventually, Tate was going to have to learn that getting the last word was not the same thing as being right. 18 minutes later, Noah heard a knock on the Green Rambler's front door. He was still lying in bed, staring into the darkness, when he heard movement from the hallway. Then came the sound of footsteps. "Tate." Noah heard the quiet creak of Tate walking down the stairs in his bare feet, his footsteps echoing softly through the house. And as if nothing unusual had happened, he was humming. Noah immediately recognized the melody. Duh, of course. Closer by 9 Inch Nails. You let me violate you. You let me desecrate you. You let me complicate you. I broke apart my insides. Help me, I've got no soul to sell. Help me, the only thing that works for me. Help me get away from myself. I want to fuck you like an animal. My whole existence is flawed. You get me closer to God. You can have my isolation. You can have the hate that it brings. You can have my absence of faith. You can have my everything. You tear down my reason. Help me, it's your sex I can smell. Help me, you make me perfect. Help me become somebody else. My whole existence is flawed. You get me closer to God. Through every forest. Above the trees. Within my stomach. Scraped off my knees. I drink the honey. Inside your hive. You are the reason. I stay alive. Only Tate could turn a heated argument into something strangely theatrical. One moment he was furious, convinced he had been wronged by everyone around him. Next, he was walking through the house like he was in his own private world, completely committed to whatever plan he had created in his head. Noah sat up in bed listening. The humming faded as Tate reached the front door. Another knock came from outside. Noah closed his eyes. He didn't know what bothered him more, the fact that Tate had actually called someone, or the fact that Tate was making sure Noah knew exactly what was happening. It was never just about the argument. With Tate, everything carried a deeper meaning. Every action was a message. Every silence was a statement. Noah had spent years learning how to read him, how to see past the anger and pride to the hurt underneath. But sometimes he wondered if Tate understood how exhausting it was to always be the person trying to translate him. The house fell quiet again. Noah remained in bed, refusing to rush downstairs. Not this time. If Tate wanted to prove a point, Noah would let him. But he also hoped, somewhere beneath the stubbornness and performance, Tate would eventually realize that love wasn't measured by who could hurt less or who could win the argument. It was measured by who was willing to listen. Noah could hear from behind his locked bedroom door Tate walking his female guest up the stairs while Tate was kissing her. The sounds echoed off the hallway, each step feeling louder than it should have. The footsteps finally stopped at Tate's door, one door down from Noah's. Noah waited. Of course, he didn't hear Tate's door shut. Noah knew Tate well enough to know that wasn't an accident. Tate would leave the door open because he wanted Noah to hear. He wanted Noah to understand exactly what message he was sending. Tate wanted Noah to know that if Noah didn't want him, he would find 50 other girls who would. It wasn't just about the person standing outside Tate's room. It was about making Noah feel replaceable. Noah lay there quietly, realizing that this was Tate's way of fighting back. When Tate felt rejected or hurt, he didn't always explain his feelings. Sometimes he tried to prove that he could walk away first. But Noah knew Tate. He knew this wasn't confidence. It was pride. It was hurt disguised as arrogance. And somewhere beneath all of it was the fear that Noah might truly stop choosing him. Noah heard the girl giggling and sighing from down the hallway. The sounds carried through the quiet house, making the distance between their two rooms feel even smaller. He could hear Tate's laughter, the familiar confidence in his voice, and the ease with which he seemed to enjoy having someone else there. But Noah knew Tate too well. He knew this wasn't just about wanting company. Tate wanted him to hear. Every laugh, every whispered word, every moment that drifted through the hallway felt carefully placed. Tate wanted Noah to understand that if Noah didn't choose him, Tate could find someone else. He wanted to prove that he was wanted, that he was desirable, that he didn't need to sit alone, wondering if Noah still cared. Noah stared at the ceiling, his chest heavy. The hardest part was that he knew Tate's anger was rarely just anger. It was hurt. It was fear. It was Tate trying to convince himself that he couldn't be rejected because there would always be someone else willing to take his place. But Noah knew the truth. This wasn't about the girl downstairs or the attention Tate could get from anyone else. It was about the one person Tate wanted to notice. Noah. Noah knew exactly what Tate was doing. This wasn't the first time. It was a repeat of the Tina incident back when they were both attending Brown University during their first year of college. Tate had done something similar then. He had deliberately brought another woman into the situation because he wanted Noah to feel the consequences of refusing him. It wasn't really about Tina. It wasn't really about the other woman. It was about Noah. Tate had felt rejected, and in Tate's mind, rejection was something that had to be answered. He couldn't simply sit with the feeling. He couldn't accept that Noah had a right to set a boundary even with someone he loved. Instead, Tate's thoughts had been simple and stubborn. How dare Noah keep me out? How dare Noah say no? How dare Noah decide that Tate's anger, his demands, or his hurt did not automatically mean Noah had to give in? Noah understood that this was Tate's pattern. When he felt powerless, he tried to regain control. When he felt unwanted, he tried to prove he was wanted by someone else. But what Tate never seemed to understand was that these actions didn't make Noah want to come closer. They made Noah feel further away. Noah cared about Tate deeply. That had never been the question. The question was whether Tate could understand that love did not mean unlimited access. It did not mean someone else's boundaries disappeared because Tate was upset. And once again, Noah found himself lying awake, realizing that the person who wanted to be loved more than anyone was also the person who sometimes made it the hardest to love him. Noah tried to block out the noise by dragging a pillow over his head, pressing the fabric tight against his ears. It did nothing. The sounds from the next room still reached him, loud and wet, bouncing off the high ceilings and the bare walls of the penthouse. Tate's mouth was on the woman's, their kisses messy and loud, tongues sliding together with audible slick sounds that carried through the open doorway. Every wet smack and hungry pull of lips echoed back at Noah, making his chest tighten with a sharp, burning jealousy. He could hear Tate laugh low in his throat, the sound rich and cocky, followed by the woman's lighter giggle. Then the rhythm changed. Noah pictured Tate spinning her around, heard the shift in their breathing, and then the unmistakable sound of lips pressing lower. Scene retracted, read extended version on Wattpad. You ready? Noah's stomach flipped. A second later came the unmistakable wet sound of Tate physically connecting with that strange girl. Noah could hear every detail while Tate was physically intimate with her. Noah lay frozen under the pillow. Noah would hear everything, filling the entire space while Noah burned with jealousy on the other side of the wall. Noah covered his head with a pillow, but he could still hear Tate with that girl. Noah pressed the pillow harder over his ears, but it did nothing to block the relentless sounds bleeding through the thin dormitory wall. Tate's deep, commanding voice cut through first. Scene retracted, read extended version on Wattpad. The headboard slammed into the shared wall in a steady, punishing rhythm. The wall shook. Noah's bed frame rattled against it. The bed slammed harder. Noah could feel the vibration traveling through the frame. Tate's voice rose again, louder, almost snarling. The wall shook violently while her back pressed flat to the drywall right above Noah's headboard. There was a steady, heavy thud that rattled the entire frame of Noah's bed for hours. The wall finally stopped shaking as their room vibrating with the intensity of their encounter. Noah didn't get a wink of sleep that night. The hours dragged on slowly, each one heavier than the last. The Green Rambler remained quiet except for the occasional sounds coming from down the hallway, reminders that Tate was determined to make his point. Noah understood what was happening. Tate wasn't simply looking for someone else. He was punishing Noah. In Tate's mind, Noah had committed the ultimate offense. He had chosen distance. He had chosen to sleep alone. He had refused to open the door and give Tate the comfort and closeness Tate wanted. To Tate, that felt like rejection. And instead of accepting Noah's boundary, Tate tried to prove that he could replace what Noah had denied him. But as the night stretched on, Noah began to see something deeper. This wasn't really about the girl. It wasn't even really about romance. It was about proximity. It was about comfort. It was about Tate wanting to feel wanted enough that someone would let him in, hold him close, and reassure him that he wasn't alone. Noah realized that Tate had always struggled to separate physical closeness from emotional security. When he felt abandoned or pushed away, he searched for something that could temporarily fill that emptiness. The attention from someone else became a substitute. A temporary solution. A way to convince himself that he still mattered. But Noah knew Tate. He knew that beneath all the pride and anger was someone who didn't actually want to be replaced. He wanted the one person he trusted to choose him. And that was what made it hurt. Because Tate had spent the entire night trying to prove he didn't need Noah, while unknowingly revealing how much he did. Noah stared at the ceiling as the first hints of morning light began to creep through the window. He loved Tate. But love couldn't mean allowing every wound Tate carried to become someone else's responsibility. Eventually, Tate would have to learn that closeness could not be demanded. It had to be built. And trust could not survive when someone tried to force their way back into your heart by making you afraid to lose them. At 8 in the morning, Noah finally accepted that sleep was not going to happen. The night had been long and the exhaustion sat heavily behind his eyes. He had spent hours lying awake, trying not to listen, trying not to let Tate's choices get under his skin, but the message had been clear. Tate wanted him to know. Slowly, Noah pushed himself out of bed. There was no point staying there anymore. He needed coffee, he needed food, he needed a moment away from the tension that had filled the house. He walked toward the bedroom door and unlocked it. The quiet click of the lock sounded strangely loud. Noah stepped into the hallway, intending to go downstairs and make breakfast, when he suddenly heard the girl's voice from Tate's room. "Are you going to marry me?" Noah stopped. The question hit him harder than he expected. His heart tightened. For a moment he simply stood there, frozen in the hallway. He knew it was irrational. He knew Tate had the right to live his life. He knew that after everything that had happened, he couldn't demand that Tate belong only to him. But the thought of Tate marrying someone else caused something deep inside Noah to ache. Because beneath all the anger, beneath all the arguments and frustration, Noah still loved him. The idea of someone else taking that place, the place Noah had occupied for so many years, felt impossible to imagine. Noah looked toward Tate's closed door. He wondered what Tate would say. Would he answer out of anger? Would he say yes just to prove a point? Or would he finally realize that using another person to hurt Noah would only create more damage? Noah lowered his gaze. For the first time that morning, he understood that the hardest part wasn't being angry at Tate. It was accepting how much he still cared. The second before Tate answered felt like an eternity. Noah stood frozen in the hallway, unable to move, unable to breathe properly. The question repeated in his mind over and over. "Are you going to marry me?" His heart tightened painfully. Please, Noah thought. Please don't. It wasn't that he wanted Tate unhappy. It wasn't that he wanted to control Tate's future. But the idea of Tate giving someone else the part of himself that Noah had spent years protecting felt unbearable. Noah had always believed that whatever happened between them, every argument, every mistake, every impossible moment, there was something unspoken that remained, something permanent. Tate was difficult, Tate was stubborn, Tate could be cruel when he was hurt. But Tate was also Tate. The person who had known Noah better than anyone. The person who had reached for him in the middle of the night. The person who, despite all his flaws, had always made Noah feel chosen. And now Noah was standing outside a door, hearing the possibility that Tate was choosing someone else. The silence before Tate answered became unbearable. Then Tate spoke. "Got it." Noah's stomach dropped. "Of course, Nora, I'll marry you." The words were simple, casual, almost effortless. But to Noah, they felt like something breaking. For a moment, he couldn't process what he had heard. Tate was getting married. Tate, the same Tate who had spent the entire night trying to prove he didn't need Noah, was apparently ready to promise forever to someone else. Noah stared at the floor. He felt foolish for how much it hurt. He had told himself he was setting boundaries. He had told himself he was doing the right thing. He had told himself that loving Tate didn't mean surrendering every time Tate became angry. All of that was still true. But none of it made the pain disappear. Because somewhere deep inside, Noah had never imagined a future where Tate belonged to someone else. The girl laughed happily. "What about a month from now?" she said. "We could get married at that nice chapel. We could be so happy." Noah's chest felt heavy. Happy. The word echoed in his mind. Was Tate actually happy? Was this real? Or was Tate trying to prove something? Noah didn't know anymore. He had spent so much time trying to understand Tate's anger that he had forgotten Tate was capable of making choices Noah couldn't predict. "I have to go to work," Nora said after a while. Noah heard movement from inside the room. "Could I come back tonight, 10 o'clock, just like last night?" There was a brief pause. Then silence. But Noah knew Tate well enough to understand that whatever answer he gave, he had given one. The girl giggled. She kissed Tate goodbye. "I love you, Tate, call me." The word struck Noah harder than he expected. "I love you." A phrase Noah had heard and said so many times. A phrase that suddenly sounded like it belonged to someone else. The girl walked down the stairs, still smiling, and the front door opened. Then closed. The Green Rambler became quiet again. Noah remained standing in the hallway. He wasn't angry. Not yet. He was too shocked. Because the hardest thing to accept wasn't that Tate had brought someone home. It wasn't even that Tate had tried to hurt him. It was the possibility that Tate might have actually meant it. That maybe, beneath all the chaos and anger, Tate had found someone else he wanted. And Noah had no idea where that left him. The landline in the kitchen, sitting beside the table where Noah had been quietly eating breakfast, suddenly rang. The sharp sound cut through the silence of the Green Rambler. Noah was so lost in his thoughts that he nearly jumped out of his chair. The spoon slipped from his hand and clattered onto the floor. For several seconds he just sat there, staring at the phone. His mind was still stuck on the conversation he had overheard upstairs. Tate. Marriage. Someone else. The word still felt unreal. Noah reached for the receiver, trying to collect himself. "Hello." "Oh, hey buddy," Joey said on the other end. "How's it going?" Noah opened his mouth. For a moment he almost gave the automatic answer. "Fine." The word that covered everything. The word people used when they didn't know how to explain the chaos happening inside them. "Fine," Noah started. Then he stopped. He couldn't say that. Not today. Tate just got engaged. Silence. Not ordinary silence. The kind of silence where the other person is so stunned they forget to respond. Noah held the receiver against his ear, listening to the complete lack of words on the other end. Finally Joey spoke. "Wait, what?" Noah looked down at his untouched breakfast. "He got engaged." Another pause. Joey sounded completely bewildered. Noah tried to explain. "It happened an hour ago." "Fuck," Joey swore. Noah rubbed his forehead. "I heard it happened." He didn't know why saying it out loud made it feel even more real. On the other end, Noah could hear Joey trying to process the information. "Is he Joey stopped himself. What? Noah waited. Is he marrying someone he just met? Joey asked carefully. Is she a hooker because Tate wasn't even dating anyone? Noah didn't answer. That silence told Joey everything. Oh no. His voice changed. The confusion turned into concern. Did he bring someone home and just decide this? Noah closed his eyes. I don't know. Joey was quiet again, but this time it wasn't confusion. It was anger. Explosive anger and rage. The kind that came from someone who cared deeply and couldn't understand what they were hearing. Put my nephew on the phone. Noah froze. What? You heard me, Joey said firmly. Put Tate on the line. Noah looked toward the stairs. He imagined Tate upstairs, completely unaware that Joey now knew. Or maybe Tate did know. Maybe deep down Tate had expected this. Noah gripped the phone tighter. I don't know what to do. His voice came out quieter than he intended. And that was the truth. Noah had spent years understanding Tate's moods, defending him, and trying to reach him when no one else could. But this time felt different. This wasn't just another argument. This was Tate making a decision that could change everything. And Noah had no idea whether he was supposed to stop him, support him, or simply accept that he no longer had a place in Tate's future. Noah covered the receiver with his hand. Uncle Joey is on the phone, Noah called toward the stairs. He wants to talk to you. He paused. And no, you don't have a choice. The silence that followed lasted only a second. You know exactly what this is about. The moment the words left Noah's mouth, he heard movement upstairs. A loud crash echoed through the house. Noah looked toward the staircase. A few seconds later, Tate appeared. He came down the stairs quickly, almost too quickly, nearly missing the last step. He caught himself at the railing, regained his balance, and continued toward the kitchen with a stormy expression on his face. His eyes immediately locked onto the phone. Without hesitation, Tate walked over and took the receiver from Noah's hand. Before putting it to his ear, Tate covered the mouthpiece. Why the fuck did you tell him? Tate demanded. Noah stared at him. Because he called. Tate's jaw tightened. That wasn't your information to share. No, Noah said quietly, but it was a pretty big thing to hide. For a moment, Tate looked like he wanted to argue. Then he remembered Joey was waiting. He turned away, lifted the receiver, and forced his voice into something calmer. Hello, Tate speaking. There was a pause. Noah watched him carefully. Whatever Joey said on the other end, Tate's expression changed almost immediately. The confidence he had carried all morning faded slightly, replaced by irritation and defensiveness. Yeah, Tate said. Another pause. No, I know what you're calling about. He leaned against the counter, his eyes drifting briefly toward Noah. Noah could see it now. The same pattern. Tate had wanted to control the moment. He wanted the announcement to happen on his terms when he was ready, when he had prepared himself for everyone's reaction. But now the reaction had arrived before he could shape it. And for once, Tate didn't have complete control over the conversation. I forbid you from marrying Noah. Joey's voice exploded through the receiver. Tate immediately pulled the phone away from his ear, wincing as the shouting continued. I forbid it, do you hear me? You are not going to embarrass this family with some scandal. Noah looked up sharply. Tate's expression changed. Confusion replaced the anger. He slowly brought the phone back closer. Uncle Joey, what are you talking about? But Joey was too far into his anger to hear the question. You think I don't understand what is happening here? This family has survived 700 years of duty, tradition, and lineage. 700 years. You are not going to throw that away because you have lost your mind. Tate stared at the phone. Noah could see the realization beginning to form. Joey had misunderstood. Completely. You are not bringing someone with no connection to this family into the center of our legacy, Joey continued. Do you understand me? I forbid it. Tate's eyebrows drew together. Uncle Joey. No. The word came through the receiver like a command. If I have to come over to that house myself and knock some sense into you, I will. I will sit you down and explain what it means to carry responsibility. What does it mean to be the next leader of this family? Tate looked over at Noah. For once he seemed almost speechless. Because this wasn't the conversation he expected. Joey wasn't angry because Tate had impulsively proposed marriage. He wasn't angry because Tate had brought someone home. He had misunderstood the entire situation. "You think about anything except your impulses," Joey demanded. "Do you ever stop and consider the consequences of what you do?" Tate's jaw tightened. Normally, that accusation would have started a fight. Normally, Tate would have immediately attacked back. But this time he just stood there holding the phone. Noah watched him carefully. Because beneath all the anger, beneath the pride, there was something else. A person realizes that the world had interpreted his actions in a way he never expected. And for perhaps the first time that morning, Tate didn't know what to say. "This family does not do gay scandal, do you understand me?" Joey's voice thundered through the receiver. Tate held the phone away from his ear again, his expression shifting between disbelief and irritation. Noah stood nearby, realizing just how badly the situation had spiraled. Joey wasn't angry about the engagement. Not exactly. He was angry because he believed he understood what had happened, and he had built an entire argument around something that wasn't even true. "You are not allowed to get engaged or married without your father's consent and blessing," Joey continued. "Do you understand? Before you propose, before you make promises, before you make any decisions that affect this family, you go to your father first." Tate's eyes narrowed. "Uncle Joey." "No, you listen." The authority in Joey's voice stopped him. "You don't ask afterward, you don't announce it after you've already made a decision. That's not how this family works." Tate looked away. "If your father says no, then that's the end of it." The words hung in the kitchen. "You want to lose access to your fortune before you even marry someone, is that what you want?" Noah watched Tate's expression carefully. That was the part Tate hated most, not the anger, but the reminder that other people had expectations of him. "You are supposed to go to your father," Joey continued. "He is the one responsible for guiding this family, he makes those decisions for a reason." A pause. Then Joey sighed, his frustration turning into something closer to exhaustion. "You're just like your cousin Casey." Tate's jaw tightened at the comparison. "You see a pretty face, you get swept away, and suddenly you forget every responsibility you have." Noah almost expected Tate to explode. Instead, Tate stayed silent. "Sometimes," Joey continued, "I think we should put an ankle monitor on you just to make sure you don't make some ridiculous decision before anyone can stop you." Tate finally spoke. "Are you finished?" His voice was calm. Too calm. Noah recognized that tone. It was the tone Tate used when he was trying very hard not to lose control. Joey continued talking, but Tate looked down at the phone with a strange expression. Not anger. Not exactly. Something closer to realizing that everyone around him had been reacting to a situation that none of them fully understood. And Noah wondered how much longer it would take before Tate admitted the one thing he hated most. That sometimes his actions had consequences before he was ready to face them. "Have you forgotten?" Joey continued. Tate held the phone silently against his ear, his expression becoming harder with every word. "You don't choose your wife," Joey said. "The person responsible for this family, your father, helps select appropriate matches. You are presented with options and you make a decision based on what is best for the future. An arranged marriage with a socialite of the highest esteem with the right financial background is how we maintain our wealth and our family legacy." Noah stood across the kitchen listening. The words felt like they belonged to another century. "This is about bloodlines, lineage, social standing, and protecting what generations before us built," Joey continued. "We have drilled this into you since you were a child, since your second birthday." Tate's eyes narrowed. "Do you not understand what I'm telling you?" The anger in Joey's voice was mixed with something else. Certainty. The kind of certainty that came from a lifetime of believing a system was simply the way things had to be. "We have traditions," Joey said. "We have expectations. You don't simply wake up one morning and decide to throw everything aside. Have you forgotten what happened to your cousin Casey? Do you want that to happen to you? You'll turn out to be a nobody, a social pariah, a joke because you took one look at an actress, a hooker, and got carried away. Do you want to be the laughingstock in the Forbes magazine?" Tate looked down. Then Joey's voice softened slightly. And don't misunderstand me, I love Noah. Noah looked surprised. He is a wonderful young man. He is loyal, intelligent, and he has been part of this household for years. I love that blonde as though he were my own nephew and son. I'd die for him. I would do anything for him, but I can't allow or support someone of his distinction joining this family beyond sentiment or patronage. You need somebody who is your social and financial equal. It's hard enough a marriage between two equal partners without adding unknown variables or someone without the right pedigree or background. It's always a disaster. We've had two people in the past 100 years bring in unknown variables, and it either ended in divorce, a major financial loss, or we became a social joke as to what not to do when securing the next generation of blues. A pause. Tate's face remained unreadable. Noah is dear to us, Joey continued, but you have responsibilities beyond what you personally want. The kitchen was completely silent. Then Joey returned to his anger. You don't get to ignore everything you've been taught because you are upset or because you are confused. Tate finally spoke. I'm not confused. The words were quiet, but they carried weight. Joey ignored the interruption. You will do what is expected of you. You don't have to like every responsibility you carry. Many people in powerful families have had to make sacrifices. Noah watched Tate carefully. For once, Tate wasn't arguing. He wasn't mocking. He wasn't making a sarcastic remark. He was just listening. And somehow that was more unsettling. You need to go upstairs, Joey ordered. You need to fix this situation. Stop making impulsive decisions and start thinking about your future. You want to be the next Casey. You want your father to sit you down and lock your fortune until his death, leaving you practically penniless because you can't be trusted to make sound financial decisions. Do you want to have to work 9 to 5 because you've proven you can't even be trusted with $1 a month? Tate's grip tightened around the phone. Joey. What? A long pause. Tate looked toward Noah. I think you have misunderstood what happened. The silence on the other end was immediate. Noah held his breath. Because for the first time that morning, Tate wasn't fighting to win. He was preparing to tell the truth. What am I missing? Joey's voice had shifted from anger to confusion, but the frustration was still there. Are you already married? Did you skip the engagement and just get married without telling anyone, or? He hesitated. Well, you couldn't legally marry a man in the 90s, but some kind of private partnership, something arranged through lawyers. Tate stared at the phone. For perhaps the first time all morning, he looked genuinely exhausted. Uncle Joey. No, because I need to understand what is happening. Tate closed his eyes. I did not ask Noah to marry me. A pause. I did not ask him for some kind of partnership. He looked toward Noah. What we have is platonic. Noah remained quiet. You know that, Tate said sharply into the phone. I've told you that 1 billion times. Joey didn't respond immediately. Tate's frustration grew. I'm not going to wake up tomorrow and suddenly decide that Noah is the love of my life in some romantic sense. That's not what this is. The words came out with a mixture of irritation and exhaustion, as though Tate was tired of explaining something he believed should have been obvious. This is a platonic relationship, a bond, a companionship. Another pause. That's it. On the other end of the phone, Joey still didn't sound convinced. Tate. No. Tate shook his head. I'm serious. He glanced at Noah again. I'm not engaged. The kitchen went quiet. Noah felt the words settle over him. Not engaged. The relief should have been immediate. But instead, he felt something more complicated. Because the entire morning had been a storm of misunderstandings, anger, and hurt feelings, Tate had spent the night trying to prove he didn't need Noah while everyone around them was interpreting his actions through their own fears and assumptions. And now the truth was finally coming out. But Noah still couldn't forget why any of this had happened. Tate had still tried to hurt him. He had still used another person to make a point. The misunderstanding was cleared. The damage was not. Tate lowered his voice. Nothing happened the way you think it did. Joey remained silent. And Noah wondered if that was the first honest conversation anyone had managed to have with Tate all day. Did you ask a girl? Joey demanded. Tate frowned. Did you bring someone home and suddenly decide she was good enough for something more serious after 4 rounds of entertainment? The anger in Joey's voice returned. I told you before, Tate, you don't make decisions like this because you get caught up in a moment or in a bad girl. You don't confuse attraction with lust, then ruin your future with a lifetime commitment to a penniless whore. Tate looked away. Cinderella stories belong in theaters, Joey continued. Fantasies don't belong in real life. Noah stood silently near the kitchen table listening. Joey's frustration seemed endless. Your father is going to lose his mind when he hears about this. Tate's expression changed slightly. Do you really want him angry? The question carried weight. Do you remember what happened the last time he lost his temper? Tate didn't answer. Joey continued. When you decided you were going to Brown University without properly considering what the family expected. Noah's ears immediately perked up. Brown. The name caught his attention. He looked toward Tate. Tate's posture changed almost imperceptibly. It was subtle, but no one noticed. The mention of Brown wasn't just a memory. It was a reminder. A reminder of another time when Tate had made a decision that went against expectations. Another time, Tate had chosen his own path instead of following the one laid out for him. Noah had been there. He remembered. Brown had been where so many things changed between them. It was where they had both started becoming adults, where Tate's independence had collided with the expectations placed on him, and where their complicated bond had grown even stronger. Tate tightened his grip on the phone. Uncle Joey, he said quietly, this has nothing to do with Brown. Everything has something to do with Brown with you, Joey snapped. That was the first time you decided you could ignore every rule and do whatever you wanted. Tate's eyes hardened. And look how that turned out. The room went quiet. Noah watched the exchange carefully. Because beneath the argument about marriage, money, and family expectations was something much older. This wasn't just about one night. It was about Tate's entire life being a battle between what others demanded from him and what he wanted for himself. And Noah wondered if Tate even knew the difference anymore. Joey sounded exhausted now, as if his anger had finally burned down into pure frustration. If my brother finds out you're engaged to some penniless woman you brought home last night, he is going to lose his mind. He paused. He will kill you, Tate, you know exactly what he's like. Noah felt his stomach twist at the words. Not because he believed Joey literally meant it, but because of the fear underneath them. The entire conversation had revealed something Noah had never fully understood about Tate's world. There were rules. Rules Tate had been fighting against his entire life. Rules about family, reputation, duty, and expectations. Tate shook his head. Stop being melodramatic, Joey. The calmness in his voice almost sounded like disbelief. Joey gave a humorless laugh. Melodramatic. Noah heard the exhaustion in his voice. Tate, I have gotten you out of more scrapes than I can count because you have an incredible talent for ignoring every sensible path placed in front of you. Tate looked away. You don't walk down the road, make a careful decision, and accept where it leads. No, you go off the road, drive through the wilderness, and act surprised when there are consequences. Noah couldn't help but notice the accuracy of the description. It sounded like Tate. Not all of him, but a part of him. The part that charged forward without thinking, the part that believed he could handle any disaster after it happened. Joey continued. I have spent years telling you to think ahead. Tate sighed. And if I hadn't spent all these years reminding you about responsibility, protecting yourself, and using condoms without exception, you would have 50 kids running around by now. Noah's eyes widened slightly at the bluntness. Even after everything that had happened that morning, hearing Joey speak so openly about Tate's impulsiveness was jarring. Tate rubbed his forehead. You're impossible. No, Joey replied, I'm realistic. A pause. Your father is going to lose his mind. The words settled heavily. Noah looked at Tate. For the first time, he saw something beneath the arrogance. Not fear exactly. Tension. The kind that came from someone who had spent years pushing against expectations while knowing those expectations were still waiting for him. Noah suddenly understood that Tate wasn't just fighting Joey on the phone. He was fighting an entire world that had already decided who he was supposed to become. And yet, despite all of that, Noah couldn't forget the other truth sitting between them. Tate had still chosen to hurt him rather than admit he was hurt. Two things could be true at the same time. Tate could be trapped by expectations, and Tate could still be responsible for the way he treated people. Noah watched him silently, wondering if Tate would ever learn that being free didn't mean being careless. It meant choosing who you wanted to be when nobody else was making the decision for you. Joey continued. Tate, please tell me you were drinking during this whole thing. There was a pause. Please tell me you were intoxicated. Please tell me you weren't thinking clearly, because if you were under the influence, I could call some lawyers. We could make an argument that you were impaired, that you did not have complete control of your faculties, and that could minimize the social, emotional, and legal consequences of this disaster. Noah listened silently. The conversation had gone so far beyond what he expected that he almost felt like he was watching a storm unfold from outside himself. Everyone seemed to be reacting to a different version of events. Joey believed Tate had made a reckless life decision. Tate knew he had not. And Noah was still trying to understand how the night had become this complicated. If she decides to take action after you end things, Joey continued, we need to make sure the damage is limited. I wasn't drinking, Tate said. The response was immediate. Flat. Certainly. The silence afterward was almost worse than the shouting. Then Joey made a sound. A long, defeated noise of disbelief, like someone watching a carefully built plan collapse. Tate. Noah looked at him. Tate's expression had changed. For once he wasn't smug. He wasn't amused. He looked almost tired. I wasn't drunk, Tate repeated. Joey sighed heavily. That was not the answer I wanted. Tate leaned against the counter. Because you wanted an excuse. No, Joey replied, because I wanted a reason that made sense. The words lingered. Noah felt something shift in the room. Because underneath all the arguing, Joey wasn't just angry about the engagement. He was trying to understand why Tate kept making choices that seemed impossible to predict. And Tate, for once, didn't have an easy comeback. He couldn't blame alcohol. He couldn't blame the confusion. He couldn't say he didn't know what he was doing. He had to sit with the fact that his decisions were his own. Noah watched him quietly. That was the lesson Tate struggled with more than anything. Freedom meant having choices. But it also meant accepting responsibility for them. California doesn't allow breach of promise lawsuits anymore, Tate said. It's the 90s, Joey. Noah stood silently nearby, listening to the argument unfold. The conversation had moved far beyond the engagement itself. It had become about reputation, family expectations, and the rules Tate had spent his entire life pushing against. Well, thank God for that, Joey replied. There was a long pause. When I was a young man, situations like this could destroy a rich person. A woman could sue for millions if a promise of marriage was broken. Tate sighed. Joey. No, listen to me. Joey's voice became more serious. Who is she? Tate frowned. What? Who is this woman? What is her background? What family does she come from? Noah felt uncomfortable hearing the direction the conversation was taking. Joey, that's not the point. It is the point in this family. A pause. If she tells a single person in the city and you break this off later, especially considering her lack of pedigree, this could become a humiliation for everyone. Tate's expression hardened. She's not trying to humiliate anyone. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Joey let out a frustrated breath. You always think you know best. Noah watched Tate closely. For once, Tate wasn't responding with sarcasm or anger, he looked tired. Because beneath Joey's accusations was something Tate understood very well. Fear. Fear of losing control. Fear of scandal. Fear of disappointing the family. But Noah also noticed something else. Tate seemed almost offended by the idea that someone he had invited into his home was being viewed as a threat rather than a person. She is not blackmailing us, Tate said firmly. The kitchen went quiet. She is a person, Tate continued. Noah looked at him. It was a small statement, but it mattered. For all of Tate's flaws, for all the ways he struggled with pride and responsibility, there were moments when he refused to see people as objects or tools. Joey remained silent for a moment. And Noah wondered if this conversation was finally forcing everyone to confront something bigger than an engagement. The question wasn't just what Tate had done. It was the kind of person Tate wanted to become. Joey shook his head. You know the stipulations of the annual trust, the annuities, and the inheritance agreements. Tate remained silent. Any engagement involving a member of this family, especially the male heir to these assets, without the current patriarch's prior approval and financial acceptance can have consequences. Noah watched Tate carefully. Joey's voice grew sharper. You could forfeit your entire inheritance until your father dies. Tate's expression changed slightly. You could be left with nothing. The words hung in the kitchen. You understand what I'm telling you? If that woman believes she is engaged to you, if she tells people, if this becomes public, you could lose access to everything. Joey sounded almost incredulous. You could be financially cut off for the next 25 years if your father lives as long as his father did. Tate looked away. Are you listening to me? A pause. Are you stupid? Noah flinched slightly at the harshness of the words. But Tate didn't react the way Noah expected. He didn't explode. He didn't throw an insult back. He simply stood there absorbing it. You're a liability, Tate, Joey continued. The word seemed to echo. A liability. Noah looked at Tate. For years, Tate had acted as though nothing could touch him. He had confidence, money, intelligence, and a presence that filled every room he entered. But this conversation revealed something different. There were still people in Tate's life who could make him feel powerless. People who could remind him that, despite all his independence, he was still tied to expectations he had inherited before he was old enough to question them. And Noah wondered if Tate's greatest struggle had never been about wealth or status. Maybe it was about proving that he was more than what his family had decided he was supposed to be. Tate shook his head. I swear, Joey, I'm not engaged. His voice was firm, almost desperate. I've never asked anyone, especially a woman, to marry me. I'm not engaged at all. He paced slightly around the kitchen, trying to convince his uncle. Across the room, Noah looked up from the dining table where he was quietly eating his cereal. His spoon paused halfway to his mouth. Why was Tate lying? Noah had heard it. He had heard the conversation upstairs. He had heard Tate tell the woman he would marry her. The words had been clear. I'll marry you. Noah couldn't understand it. Tate wasn't just denying it to Joey. He was denying something Noah knew had happened. I swear, Tate repeated, I have no plans on ever getting married unless someone puts a gun to my head. He shook his head. I'm not getting married. A pause. Do you believe me? Noah watched him closely. There was something strange about Tate's expression. It didn't look like someone casually lying. It looked like someone trying desperately to make another person understand something that made perfect sense inside his own mind. On the other end of the phone, Joey was silent. Then finally, what is this engagement business Noah was talking about 10 minutes ago? Tate stopped moving. His eyes shifted toward Noah. Noah felt the weight of that look. Because now the question was no longer just between Tate and Joey. It was between Tate and Noah. Noah lowered his spoon. I heard you, he said quietly. Tate stared at him. I heard what you said. The kitchen became completely silent. Joey waited on the phone. Tate looked caught between frustration and disbelief. Because in Tate's mind, maybe the situation was different. Maybe he had meant something else. Maybe he had convinced himself it wasn't real. But Noah had heard the words. And now Tate had to explain the difference between what he said and what he believed he had done. Calm down, Tate said. You're going to get a rash with all this screaming, Joey. There was a brief pause. Noah looked up from the table, already knowing that Tate was about to say something that would somehow make the situation even more complicated. She's not my date, Tate continued. She's not my fiancée. He took a breath. She's an escort. The silence on the other end of the phone was immediate. Then Joey made a sound of complete disbelief. You got engaged to an escort. Tate's eyes widened. No, no, Joey, I didn't. He sounded almost offended by the misunderstanding. That's not what happened. Noah stared at him. Because somehow, that explanation wasn't making anything better. She was a role player, Tate clarified quickly. It was a scenario. Joey was silent. A scenario, he repeated. Yes. Tate glanced toward Noah. I was trying to teach Noah a lesson, Tate said. The words made Noah look up from the table. Tate continued, unaware or unwilling to acknowledge how much the explanation revealed. Noah got above his station. He was ignoring me. He decided he could just shut me out and make his own rules. His grip tightened around the phone. So I wanted him to understand something. A pause. I wanted him to understand that I'm not someone who can just be kept waiting. Noah stared at him. The hurt he felt wasn't because Tate had found someone else. It was because Tate still couldn't see what he had done. Tate continued speaking to Joey. There are other people out there, people who would choose me, people who wouldn't make me feel like I have to beg for attention. The kitchen became quiet. Noah lowered his eyes. Because beneath Tate's anger was the insecurity he rarely admitted. Tate didn't actually believe he was unwanted. He feared it. And instead of saying that, instead of admitting that Noah's distance hurt him, he had tried to create a situation where Noah would feel the same fear. Joey's silence on the other end of the phone was telling. Even he seemed to realize that this wasn't an engagement problem anymore. It was a Tate problem. Tate, Joey finally said, you do understand that punishing someone because they set a boundary is not how adults handle conflict. Tate's expression hardened. But he didn't immediately argue. Noah noticed that. For once the words had reached him. Not completely. Not enough. But enough that he paused. And sometimes, with Tate, a pause was the first sign that something had gotten through. Noah's expression hardened. There it was. The part Tate still wasn't understanding. It wasn't real, Tate insisted. I'm not engaged. He rubbed his forehead. I just wanted to make a point. A pause. I wanted to show Noah what it felt like. Noah looked down at his cereal bowl. The explanation answered one question but created another. Tate hadn't been planning a marriage. He hadn't been replacing Noah. He had been trying to hurt him. That's all, Tate said into the phone. I didn't mean to upset you. Joey didn't respond. Tate, he finally said, his voice quieter now, you understand that from the outside this looks completely insane. Tate opened his mouth. Then closed it. Noah watched him carefully. Because for once, Tate seemed to realize that intent did not erase impact. It was supposed to be between Noah and me, Tate muttered. Noah looked up. And that sentence bothered him more than anything else. Because Tate still seemed to view the entire thing as a private argument, a game between two people who understood each other. But Noah knew better. Actions had consequences beyond the person you intended to affect. Even if Tate never meant to create a crisis, he had created one. And now he had to face it. Noah felt the anger begin to rise. Not the sharp, explosive kind of anger that Tate was used to seeing. Something quieter. Something heavier. Because now Noah understood. The entire situation had been engineered. The woman. The performance. The talk about marriage. The carefully placed words meant to travel through the walls of the Green Rambler. It had all been designed to get a reaction. Tate hadn't been trying to find someone else. He had been trying to make Noah feel replaced. He had wanted Noah to panic. He had wanted Noah to feel jealous enough that the locked door would become impossible to keep closed. Because that was what Tate hated most. Not being alone. Not even being angry. Being denied. Tate couldn't stand the feeling that Noah had chosen something else over him, even something as simple as choosing to sleep alone for one night. To Noah it had been a boundary. To Tate it had felt like abandonment. And instead of admitting that he was hurt, Tate had created an entire performance to force Noah back into the role he wanted him to play. Noah looked across the kitchen at him. For years he had understood Tate's need for reassurance. He had seen the fear underneath the arrogance and the loneliness beneath the confidence. But understanding someone did not mean excusing everything they did. Tate had wanted Noah's attention. He had wanted Noah to prove that he still mattered. But instead of asking for that comfort, he had tried to manipulate Noah into giving it. And that was the part that hurt the most. Noah didn't want to be chosen because Tate had frightened him into choosing. He wanted Tate to understand that love was not something someone had to earn by surrendering their own boundaries. Noah watched Tate continue talking to Joey and wondered if Tate realized the truth. The whole night had been a test. But the person Tate had really been testing was himself. "Get help, Tate." Joey's voice was no longer angry. It was exhausted. "Please get help." Tate stood silently holding the phone. "You play more games than a television game show," Joey continued. "Everything becomes a test, a challenge, a competition. You turn every feeling into some kind of performance." Noah looked down. Because hearing someone else say it made the truth harder to ignore. "Listen to me," Joey said. "Noah is not a pawn. He is not a player in whatever twisted game you create when you feel hurt." Tate's expression tightened. "Leave the blonde alone." The words were firm. "If he wants to sleep alone, let him sleep alone." A pause. "You don't own him." The kitchen became quiet. "You cannot be his friend and act like a jealous lover at the same time. You need to choose a lane and stay in it." Tate looked away. "And you better choose the platonic lane." The warning in Joey's voice was unmistakable. "Because if you don't, I will drive over to that house myself and pull you by your ear like I did when you were a child." For once, Tate didn't have a sarcastic response ready. He just stood there. Noah watched him carefully. The thing about Joey's words was that they weren't only about the events of one night. They were about a pattern. Tate wanted the closeness, loyalty, and devotion that came with being someone's most important person. But he also wanted control over when and how that closeness happened. He wanted Noah available whenever he needed comfort, but he struggled to accept when Noah needed space. Noah felt a strange mixture of relief and sadness. Relief that someone else finally saw what he had been trying to explain. Sadness because Tate had to hear it from someone else before he understood. Joey sighed. "Tate, caring about someone does not give you permission to manipulate them." The words hung in the room. Tate lowered his eyes. And for once he didn't argue. Joey hung up, leaving Tate standing there with the receiver still pressed against his ear. For a few seconds Tate didn't move. The silence after the call felt heavier than all the shouting that had come before it. Noah looked at him from the table. Part of him wanted to say something. He wanted to tell Tate exactly what he was feeling. "Forget you. Go to hell. You lied." The words were sitting right there, ready to come out. But before Noah could speak, the landline rang again. The sharp sound cut through the kitchen. Tate looked at the phone with annoyance. "Of course," he muttered. He picked up the receiver. "I told you I'm not engaged, Joey. Leave me alone." But it wasn't Joey. There was a pause. Then Tate heard the voice on the other end. "Mark." Tate's expression immediately changed. The irritation became something colder. "I'm sorry," Tate said, his voice carrying a hint of amusement, "but only one asshole call a day is permitted here." Noah looked up. Tate's jaw tightened. "Goodbye." Before Mark could say anything, Tate slammed the phone down. The receiver hit the base with a sharp crack. The kitchen went quiet again. Noah stared at Tate. "Fucking fag pervs," Tate shouted. Because somehow, after everything that had happened that morning, the strangest part was that Tate still had the ability to look offended by anyone else's behavior. Tate stood there breathing heavily, staring at the phone. Noah knew that look. Tate was angry. But Noah also knew something else. Underneath the anger was embarrassment. Because the entire morning had exposed something Tate hated admitting. He could create chaos, but he could not always control where the consequences landed. And now everyone from Joey to Mark to Noah was forcing him to face the same question. What was Tate actually trying to prove? Noah stood up from the dining table, still holding his breakfast bowl. The milk at the bottom was untouched. He carried it over to the sink, rinsed it out, washed the bowl, and carefully placed it upside down on the countertop to dry. The simple routine gave him something to focus on, something normal after a morning that had become completely absurd. He was halfway through drying his hands when he felt Tate behind him. Before Noah could turn around, Tate wrapped his arms around his torso. The sudden closeness made Noah stiffen. Tate rested his chin near Noah's shoulder and spoke quietly. "Were you jealous?" Noah froze. He didn't answer. Tate waited. "About the woman," he clarified, "not Joey." Noah slowly turned his head. He stared at Tate in disbelief. The question was so unexpected that for a moment, he didn't even know how to respond. After everything that had happened, the manipulation, the fake engagement, the sleepless night, the argument with Joey, Tate's first instinct was still to ask if Noah had been jealous. Noah's expression hardened. "Are you serious?" Tate's face shifted slightly. He seemed surprised by the reaction. "Noah. No." Noah gently removed Tate's arms from around him and turned to face him. "You actually want to know if I was jealous?" Tate looked at him. Noah shook his head. "I was hurt." The words were quieter than anger, but they carried more weight. "You didn't bring that woman into this house because you wanted her. You did it because you wanted a reaction from me." Tate opened his mouth. Noah continued. "You wanted me to panic. You wanted me to think I was losing you. You wanted me to unlock that door because you couldn't stand that I made a choice you didn't like." Tate looked away. For once, he didn't immediately argue. Noah noticed. "And the worst part," Noah said, "is that you're still asking whether I was jealous instead of asking whether you hurt me." The kitchen became silent. Tate's expression softened slightly. Because beneath all the anger and defensiveness, he knew Noah was right. Noah looked at him. "I care about you, Tate, you know I do." A pause. "But caring about you doesn't mean I have to accept being tested every time you're afraid I'm pulling away." Tate swallowed. The confidence he had carried all morning seemed smaller now. And for once, the question hanging between them wasn't whether Noah wanted him. It was whether Tate could learn how to trust that without demanding proof. "Don't misunderstand," Tate said. His voice was quieter now. "I wasn't trying to manipulate you." Noah looked at him but didn't respond. Tate took a breath. "You just never show your feelings." The frustration in his voice was different this time, less like anger, more like exhaustion. "I never know if you care. I never know if what I do affects you or if you just stand there and take it." Noah's expression softened slightly, but he remained silent. "I wasn't trying to get a rise out of you because I could." Tate shook his head. "It wasn't a game." A pause. "I wanted you to express how you feel." The word surprised Noah. Because underneath everything Tate had done, underneath the arrogance and the dramatic gestures, there was something painfully honest. Tate didn't know how to ask for reassurance. He only knew how to demand proof. "You're like a closed book," Tate continued. "You're a wall sometimes." He looked down. "I never know if you actually feel anything about this." Noah watched him carefully. Tate had spent the night trying to force an answer out of him, but now he was finally saying what he had actually wanted. "I guess," Tate hesitated. "Maybe I wanted to see if you would fight for me." The confession hung in the air. Noah felt a complicated mixture of anger and sadness. Because he understood the feeling behind the words. He understood wanting reassurance. He understood wanting to know that someone cared. But wanting reassurance did not make every action acceptable. "Tate," Noah said quietly, "I have fought for you." Tate looked up. "I've fought for you more times than you know." The words landed. "I've defended you, I've stood beside you, I've believed in you when other people didn't." Noah paused. "But fighting for you doesn't mean I have to prove my love by letting you hurt me." Tate looked away. Because that was the part he struggled with. He understood devotion. He understood loyalty. But he still had trouble understanding boundaries. Noah stepped back slightly. "If you wanted to know how I felt, you could have asked me." A long silence followed. "You didn't have to create a situation where I had to be afraid of losing you to find out if I cared." Tate lowered his eyes. And for once, he didn't look like the person who had won an argument. He looked like someone who was finally hearing the difference between being loved and being tested. "Oh please," Tate said. His voice carried more frustration than anger now. I've asked you a dozen times. Noah looked at him. Since your 18th birthday, since you met that pervy Mark, since everything started changing. Tate shook his head. You don't express how you feel, you never tell me what you're thinking, you never tell me if you're hurt, if you're angry, if you feel like you're being replaced. He took a step back, running a hand through his hair. Instead you disappear. Noah stayed quiet. When something happens, when you get upset, you go visit your friends, you find somewhere else to be, you stop talking to me. Tate's voice became more personal. You withdraw. A pause. You take away the one thing I always knew I had with you. Noah looked at him. The closeness. Tate swallowed. You pull away physically, emotionally, everything. Then you act like there are other people around who matter just as much, like I'm not the person you need anymore. His eyes narrowed slightly. So no, Noah, I can't just ask you how you feel. Why? Noah asked quietly. Because I feel like I already know the answer. The words came out bitter. There's been a wall between us for over 5 years. Noah looked away. And honestly, sometimes I feel like asking you is a waste of time. The kitchen became quiet. Words don't mean anything, Tate continued. Actions do. He looked at Noah. And in this case, a reaction. Noah felt a sting of frustration. Because Tate was revealing the truth underneath all the anger, but he was still framing it like a trial Noah had failed. Even with that girl, Tate said. His voice lowered. You didn't even react. Noah stared at him. Tate's expression hardened, but his eyes gave away the insecurity beneath it. You didn't care. Tate. No, that's what it felt like. He looked away. If I wasn't here. A pause. If my family weren't giving you a trust, if there wasn't all this history between us. He looked back at Noah. You'd be fine without me, wouldn't you? The question landed differently than all the others. Because Noah could hear what Tate wasn't saying. Would you still choose me if you didn't have a reason to stay? Noah was quiet for a moment. Then he answered. Tate, you keep asking me to prove that you matter. Tate watched him. But you don't seem to notice that I've been proving it for years. The words softened the room. I don't leave because I don't care. Noah shook his head. Sometimes I step away because I do care, because when things get too intense I need space to think, I need space to breathe. Tate looked down. And that doesn't mean I'm replacing you. A pause. It means I'm trying not to lose myself. Tate didn't respond. Because that was the part he struggled with most. He wanted Noah to choose him. But he had to learn that being chosen was different from being unable to leave. Do you want to know why I don't believe you, Noah? Tate said, his voice filled with hurt and frustration. Because when you claim you care about me, your actions don't make me feel like that's true. You're still friends with Mark after I explicitly told you that I hate him and that he makes me uncomfortable. You lock me out of your room and refuse to let me in. You go out of your way to prioritize people like Joey and Mark instead of me. We're not as close as we used to be. There's a distance between us now, and I feel like you've built a wall that I can't get through. You make me feel like you're only here because of all the other relationships tied to me, because of my parents, the trust, the finances, and everything surrounding our lives. If none of those things were involved, I honestly don't know if you would still choose to be here with me. And the hardest part is that it feels like you prioritize your own boundaries. Your own needs and your own desires over me. Tate yelled in anger, having chosen not to repress his intense feelings of resentment and jealousy towards Noah concerning how the blonde treated him. If you actually prioritized my needs and my desires for once, you wouldn't have locked me out, Tate shouted. I'd be sleeping next to you right now and you wouldn't make me feel like I'm competing with a whole legion of fucking people for your attention. You not only prioritized me, you made me feel like I was your first choice. You would spend time with other people when I wasn't around, and that's exactly how I treated you. I only went out with girls, or spent time with people you didn't care for when you weren't available or when you had somewhere else to be. I never made you sit there waiting for me while I chose someone else. But now it feels like if I wanted to go somewhere at 2 in the afternoon, I already know you'd have plans. You wouldn't make time. You wouldn't rearrange anything. I feel like I'm always the person who has to fit into your schedule instead of someone you make room for. Tate pointed at Noah, his expression a mix of anger and hurt. That's what I mean. I don't feel chosen. Choose me so there's no competition or I'm through.